All right. I'm Sierra. You guys want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry,
Meggie?
it's Zoom. Who knows who's supposed to go first? I'm Meggie, and my pronouns are they, them, and it is 7 a.m. where I am. Good morning.
So, hello, I'm Ned Barnett. My pronouns are he, him, and I make comics about heroes, health, and history. I am located in the greater Boston area, so it is not 7 a.m. It is sunny and chilly.
Two things that it is not here at all in Oakland, where it is covered in fire.
Yeah, I'm
You know what else is covered in fire?
History comics.
History comics.
Woo! We're here to talk about history comics. I thought we could all start out by saying some of our personal favorite history comics, because I know Ned, at least, has been hyped to talk about his favorite history comics.
Yes. Sorry, I'm very sleepy. Still waking up. Bit punch drunk, but some of my favorite history comics, as many of you know, yes, Golden Kamuy. I love Golden Kamuy. And I did not wear my Golden Kamuy shirt today because it's a little bit chilly. I'm sorry. And yeah, so I am a huge history comics person. I make history comics. I read history comics. While my primary focus in my own work is the First World War, and specifically the Arab Revolt, I just devour history comics of all types. Golden Kamuy is a fantastic manga. That's probably my favorite history comic that's currently ongoing. It does a really, really interesting job of presenting history in a fun way, and has a lot of lots of really interesting ways of presenting cultural information, which they do a lot of work about talking about the Ainu people in Hokkaido, northern Japan, and I am really excited to steal some of these ideas in my own work. In terms of World War I comics, I absolutely love Jacques Tardy's work with Goddamn This War and It Was the War of the Trenches. Those are incredible. So yeah. Meggie, how about you?
So one of my jobs is I'm a kids comic teacher. So my history comic loves run a little bit younger. If you are big into history comics and you really want to get your kids into history comics, I cannot recommend Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales enough. Those are, I was going to say, you probably
have.
Of course
I have one on my, I have the same one sitting on my to read.
I've read most of them. My personal favorites are either the Alamo All-Stars, because I did not understand the Alamo or know really anything about it other than Pee Wee Herman visiting it for a while and Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventures. And like the Alamo is actually very complicated, and Nate Powell, who writes it, is able to like put the story in such a way that kids understand it, which is great for me. And I also
Nathan Hale.
Yeah, or Nathan
Not Nate Powell.
Nathan Hale.
Oh, crap. Well, because my other favorite series is March by John Lewis and Nate Powell. There's a lot of Nates in comics. So I love Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, Alamo All-Stars, and also the Donner Dinner Party, which is absolutely fantastic. And then I also really love March, which is a really good read right now because it's got a lot of things that are really applicable to what's happening in America right now. And that's by John Lewis and Nate Powell. I chose two Nates. That was a bad decision on my part.
Or an excellent decision, because they're both fantastic creators.
Sierra, what's your favorite? I know you are also a big fan of Golden. Is it Cowboy?
Golden Kamuy, yeah.
Kamuy?
So,
okay.
Golden Kamuy, pick it up. There's 17 volumes, and if you're a sucker like me, you buy all of them. I have all of them. I'm a big fan of both Nathan Hale and Satoru Noda, as everyone has just gone through. I also am a big World War person. My undergraduate degree is in history and German studies, and a minor in Slavic studies, because I just never slept and didn't eat and just wanted to die.
I did not know that was your minor.
Oh yeah.
Or that was your major, minor, whatever.
Yeah. We gavariti paruski, druzia.
But that comes in handy in Virginia a whole lot.
You would be surprised. You would be surprised. So a lot of my work centers around Germany in the interwar period and World War II, and also sort of Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Europe in various time periods. So I brought out some fun, cool books that I wanted to showcase. The first one is Belonging, which is a history comic and a memoir comic, and it's very funny, funky in both of those ways. It is not funny, it is very serious. It is about her sort of going back to her parents' hometowns and discovering whether or not her grandfather was a Nazi and how she deals with that sort of legacy in her life as a German expat in America. So Nora Krug, Belonging, highly recommend, sort of straddles the history comics and the memoir divide. The other one is A Bride's Story, which is another manga which if you're into slice of life stories, this is for you, because nothing happens for like 1.5 billion volumes. It's just them living their lives in 19th century Central Asia in a nomadic tribe. And there's like a love story on top of that. But really, it's for people like me who just want to see people carve intricate poles and designs out of wood for like 400 pages, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know what, Narik,
this is the good
great
stuff.
Yeah. Hell yeah, doing great. So I just bought the one about eagle hunting because I love all of that stuff. So are we working on any projects, friends? What are we working on?
Yes,
right now?
We are.
Ned, you go first.
Ned will go first. So I am always working on projects. I'm always working on multiple projects, none of which have homes yet. But as I said earlier, I love the First World War and the Arab Revolt. So one of the things that I'm working on is a graphic biography of my man, T.E. Lawrence, otherwise known as Lawrence of Arabia, who is probably the weirdest person in history. He was history's full of weird people, but he's the most unlikely military hero that you will possibly find. He was it's my book, which also straddles the memoir and history comic divide. And so Lawrence was a 5'5" on a good day, scrawny little archaeologist from Oxford, and he had spent a number of years in the Middle East and working as an archaeologist and also as a spy towards the end of his time there, in surprise, mapping various parts of Palestine in case there was a war happening. And surprise, 6 months later, a war did happen. And he eventually was brought to work in Cairo within the Middle East, and then went off on grand and terrible adventures that were not nearly so beautiful as the movie. There was lots of dysentery. It was really gross.
Man, that ruined so many trips. Oregon Trail too, a lot of
dysentery. Oh yeah, everyone dies of, like, you've died of dysentery. The temptation to put that on like every page is really, really strong. So I am currently working on researching this book, and in the process of that, doing like trips to archives. Last year I went to Oxford University to consult his papers there. Due to COVID, I was supposed to make another trip in 2 weeks, and that isn't happening. But thankfully, places like the UK National Archives have digitized a lot of the things that I would have been traveling to see. So I've been able to continue my archival research at my desk. And then due to the complexity of trying to understand and trying to be able to talk about and simplify the Arab Revolt, I've been doing a lot of background reading in military history, and not just about history of the Arab peoples and looking into imperialism and colonialism and trying to be able to understand it as well as I possibly can so that I can make it easy to understand in comics form. So, nice. Meggie, how about you?
I'm working on a couple different things right now, and I'm gonna remember them right now. The big history comic that I'm working on right now, and I can't talk about too much of it, but I'm working on something that's the history of the Olympics, which is really fun because I am not a sports person at all, like whatsoever. Couldn't tell you how football works to save my soul. But my
Olympics.
Yes, and there's a reason for that because it sucks. No, that's not why. So I've been doing a lot of history about the Olympics for this book. My partner's family goes to the Olympics every other year, except for years that have been hit with a worldwide pandemic for some reason. But it's a lot of fun doing research in to the Olympics, and I feel like you guys probably encounter this a lot, but there are so many weird and bonkers stories that show up in history that you're just like, how has this not become a hit movie yet? Because there's like so much, there's just so much you can just like mine from all of this, all of the previous games that happened. One of my favorite things one of my favorite facts is that they let women compete in the track and field events, like in the 1920 Olympics. And there was a reporter there that was like, and they staggered across the line and they all looked completely exhausted. One of them even died. And that is not what happened at all. It was just, you know, people just ran a race and they were really tired. But because of that one article, women were banned from running races less than 800 meters for like the next 20 years.
No.
Because there was just this one guy who was like, and they're just sweating and they're exhausted. And this is definitely not what a woman does. I'm pretty sure I saw one's like bits fall off. Like, we're not doing that anymore. So that's one that I'm working on. And then I'm working on a non-history kids comic that I also don't think I can talk about. But I can talk about a lot of Olympic stuff, unless it's sport regulation rules involved. I can tell you a lot about the people and a lot about how it's changed over time. But don't ask me to explain how tennis works.
That's one of the fun things about history, though, and doing history comics is being able to explore the people and just all the weird stories that happen. And I mean, that's what's drawn me to being interested in history. I don't have an academic background in history. And B, like, why I love doing history comics is that it's filled with so many weirdos, and I love the weirdos.
There's a staggering number of weirdos and just like general weird facts. I feel like there's this idea of history as like a onward forward march to progress that, like, I blame our STEM brothers for this one, brothers and siblings in STEM. You guys need to get off your high horse and recognize that history is a drunken stumble all over the street, and like we try all sorts of stuff. Like, I learned when I was living in Austria and had to get something called a tick shot that Austria apparently had like eradicated many of the tick species that were living there until World War II, and apparently we dropped a bunch of ticks on them, according to the pharmacy guy who learned that I was American, dropped this bombshell on me and was like, here's your needle, you got to give it yourself. And so that was like,
because it's your fault to begin with.
Yeah, it was my fault personally. So like, you know, a lot of things. Austria, when I was there, was still getting over World War I. They hadn't really begun to like address World War II. If there's any Austrians in the audience here, I personally vielen Schulde, das ist meine Schulde.
They're still working through that group therapy together, trying to get past all that. They're
talking through it, you know. There's a lot to unpack, but yeah, you just like, you find random stuff like that every day and you're like, well, why don't we talk about the fact that apparently we just dropped a bunch of bugs on
I don't think I'd want to talk about it because I don't want to talk about raining ticks from the sky.
I wouldn't shut up about it.
And while we're talking about this, my brain is just like percolating with, oh, how can I draw ticks raining from the sky?
Yeah.
And like, how do we turn this into a informative and gross comic?
Yeah, it's like the rest of your life is just how to manage whatever new information you learn into like a number of pages divisible by 4.
That would be a really interesting history comic, or just like a little mini zine, all of the weird things that have been airdropped over time, because there's not just like ticks. You can do like, there's like all the chocolate drops that happened in World War II. I want to say that there was an elephant dropped, but I'm pretty sure that I'm just mixing that up with that one movie with Bill Murray. Did you guys ever see that?
Operation Dumbo Drop.
Yes, there we go. I was like, what was it? I don't know if that was real or not, but yeah. So whoever's got free
in the audience, yeah.
Let us know if that actually happened.
Let us know.
Sierra, what are you working on? I know you just released your volume 1.
I did. Right now I'm sort of in an in-between place. I just finished the first volume of my webcomic, and then I had it printed, like the Little Red Hen. I was like, well, I made the comic, now I might as well print the comic. So I'm still looking for a publisher and agents and all of that stuff, but I have 50 hardcover copies that are sitting in my house that will be mailed out this weekend.
I was going to say you have 50 claimed copies because I did not manage to get one before they all went.
I sold out yesterday afternoon, and I have never been more surprised, or thank you if you got one. Love you guys. You're the best. But very shocked, and my weekend is going to be filled with probably World War II documentaries and packing these things. So
ooh, fun way to spend the weekend.
Oh, you know, I'm hype. I'm very excited. I love World War II documentaries because if they're good, then I learn something, and if they're bad, then I just yell about it for the rest of the day.
See, I've been watching all of these like sport movies.
Sport movies.
Well, that's like such a weird, like, I mean, because you guys get a bunch of like historical like documentaries, which is really cool, but if there's like a famous or infamous athlete, it gets made into like a drama movie. So like Cool Runnings through Disney is not very accurate, but it is based on a true story. So that's how I'm spending my weekend with the Jamaican bobsled team.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. I do have another project that I'm working on and pitching, which is completely unrelated to World War II and is about Mongols in the 1800s, which is very exciting because that's not usually the time that we talk about the Mongolian people. And it turns out it was a very fun, cool, spicy time for not for the Mongolians, but certainly in Mongolia. So
fun, cool, and spicy. So I actually have a question. My research is luckily, like, a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at has happened after the 1900s. So, you know, there's print media and there's also like video documentation, but a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about is like way in the way back. I couldn't give you a date because it would be the wrong one. So how do you guys go about researching stuff like that? Ned, I know you said that you talked about going to National Archives. Sierra, what do you do? Do you have like a time travel machine? Do you have like a DeLorean that you just like pop into and then?
Yes, I have a time travel machine in my closet. It's where I go to escape.
That was my other undergraduate degree.
That's my undergraduate. Yeah. No. If you do a lot of research, and so like Eastern Central Europe is sort of like my specialty area. Anywhere from Germany to like Russia that's where the light touches for me. Simba, you can go and play in those areas, but you will probably it won't turn out well.
That dark, shadowy place, which we don't talk.
Yeah, the dark, shadowy place is where I live, the Elephant Graveyard. But tragically, you can't go very far in like Russia and Eastern Europe without hitting a bunch of very cool roadblocks, like these documents were altered, or these documents were destroyed, or we don't know what documents you're talking about. My honors thesis at William & Mary was on the Hilfswillige, which were, Hilfswillige are an extremely euphemistic term for volunteers out of concentration camps who were used to help German troops. So this was
that sounds like a fun thing to spend a lot of time researching.
Oh, you know, it turned out my like thesis professor was like an expert on like proto-fascist movements, and so we got along great because that was like my interest thing at the time, and now I'm depressed and talk about it a lot with my therapist. So therapy is great, guys.
I was gonna say, I hope you were in therapy at the time.
Talk to somebody about this stuff. Yeah, but
talk to people about proto-fascist movements and imperialism.
Yeah, vote, guys, vote in.
Vote November, please.
Vote November, please. Yeah, I was able to contact the Bundesarchiv in Munich for a lot of the documents that I needed on the German side, but I was also looking for documents on the Russian side, and so I wrote a very nice letter to the State Archive in Moscow and said, "Dear Mr. Librarian person, can I please have these documents, which you say that you have? Thank you. Spasiba." I did it in my best Russian. I had people look it over, and I emailed it, and they sent me an email 2 weeks later saying we can't find it, and then they sent me an email 2 weeks later after that saying it was destroyed. So there's some times where you just can't get sources. Also, a lot of the people that I study are nomadic horse peoples, which don't do a lot of writing in general. So a lot of that history is either oral or, fortunately, in the case of the Mongols, we have people writing about them. It's not very nice, and you have to pick out a lot of bits that are just clearly lies. They didn't write everywhere on baby-eating horses, okay? Shan Yu is an exaggeration. I will defend, I am team
baby eating horses, or horses eating baby, like horses that ate babies? Is that even a thing?
Yes, several Russian monks recorded that the Mongols specifically rode horses that were about 80 feet high, and they consumed human children and ate entire forests. So, like, you think I'm exaggerating.
No, I want one of those horses.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we all do. I do, you do, everyone should. But, like, just because it's a primary source doesn't mean it's a good source. And also, you gotta go sideways a lot of times. If anyone's interested in reading about the Mongols, I highly recommend Jack Weatherford. He wrote The Secret History of the Mongol Queens, which changed my life. If you want to read about Genghis Khan, unexpected feminist icon, you should. Absolutely, please read this book. He also wrote a book about how Genghis Khan made the modern world. He invented a postal system, which is great. Will be the subject of my next comic. Very cool, very sexy, very fun. Save the USPS.
Very spicy.
Very spicy, yeah.
It's funny what you said about primary sources, because for one of the things I was doing for the Olympics was every year that the Olympics happens, they have the Olympic torch ceremony, which, spoiler alert, was invented by the Nazis.
Sure was.
Of course it was.
That was 1936, baby.
Oh yeah. So much of like the Olympic like pomp and circumstance is like thanks to the Nazis, which is super fun. But one of the things is like before I was working on this book, I was just like making a little comic about it, and I went on Wikipedia, and it was like, yeah, so when they do the Olympic torch lighting ceremony, it's lit by 11 Vestal virgins. And I was like, oh, this is hilarious. Like, I'm definitely putting this in here. And then now I'm doing like actual research from not Wikipedia, and that doesn't show up at all. So like I made this whole comic that was like a joke about how, you know, it's got to be lit by like 11 Vestal virgins, this kind of thing. And then like I went into it and I was like, hey, that's not right at all. So when you're looking up things on Wikipedia, it's good for looking up synopsises of HBO shows, but in terms of history, make sure you double check your sources.
And if you're reading Scottish Wikipedia,
oh yeah, bad news.
Just don't. It's not actually Scots. Yeah, so fortunately, like for my research, my primary focus is on the British and British bad behavior. And
they've been great this whole time.
They're absolutely wonderful. I'm currently reading Lawrence in Arabia by Scott Anderson, which is, if you have any interest in the Arab Revolt, this is the book I recommend you read, because Anderson does a fantastic job of bringing in understanding like the German perspective and the Ottoman perspective and the American perspective and Zionism, and pretty much like he does a fantastic job and uses Lawrence mostly as a foil, and this is not a deep dive biography of him. This is a military history, and it's really, really good. I'm learning a ton, and this is an area that I already knew a lot about. But going back to with my focus being the British take a lot of records. So there is lots of documentation, lots of books that have been written. Sadly, most of them are primarily available in the UK. So when I go to the UK, I bring an empty suitcase, and my husband goes, "Why are you bringing back more books than you came over with?" I have a small library specifically about Lawrence and the Arab Revolt and British military history. But one of the also beautiful things about doing World War I comics is that photography was readily available. So nice. It's great. I have and one of the interesting things about the theater that I focus on is that individual soldiers were not banned from having their own cameras, whereas after the first year in the Western Front, the only people who were supposed to have cameras were the official documenting people, official war photographers, because it was just so damn terrible. But a lot of there were still lots of horrible aspects of war in the Middle East, but it was not the heavy trench warfare, so people could have cameras. And there are lots of photographs. One of the things I love about Lawrence is that he was an amateur photographer, but amateur in the sense that he had been taking photographs since he was a small child, so his photography is really, really good. So you could get lots of pictures of the locations and the individual people, and it's great. I love having that sort of aspect to work and pull from, and being able to go into archives and like pick up photographs taken by your subject matter is really, really cool.
Yeah, and so
guys, we're at 10:30.
Oh, good.
So I don't know if you want to start question and answer right now, or if you want to more things. It's up to you, but we do have some questions here.
Yeah, let's go to questions.
Yeah, it's good questions.
Yeah, all right.
So question number 1, would you show a quick example of the artwork in A Bride Story?
Yes, I can. Absolutely. It's gorgeous. Let's get a good. Immediately I open it up and it's literally just pages of boots. Here's a good one. I don't know if you guys can see sort of in the lighting.
That's gorgeous.
Is that showing up at all? My screen is kind of like.
Yeah, it is. Okay. It looks like a little bit like the Witch Hat Atelier comic.
Yes. I also love that one a lot.
Yeah, me too. I'm super into that book.
Yeah.
This is about history mangas. They're just like so beautifully drawn. I have one that was done in the 80s about my man Lawrence, and it's not very historically accurate, but the drawings are just like absolutely gorgeous.
I think, and I haven't done an extensive study on this, but so far in my experience, the history mangaka draw the best animals of any mangaka.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, they draw a horse and it's like, what is this horrible dog? And the history mangaka, it's like, I can count every feather on the eyeball of this eagle. Like,
let me see if I can find a good camel. Camels are super hard to draw.
Camels suck.
Goddamn camels.
Yeah.
I love drawing them, but they're really hard.
Well, that's what you get for doing a comic about the Arab Revolt. I don't understand.
Yeah. So, but like this is just like a bunch of camels walking, and it's like it's so beautiful.
So
yeah,
it's really, really pretty, and like, yeah, they're so good. Oh, this is a great one of Lawrence on a camel. It's like the camel's so cute, and it looks like a camel.
Pull it down a little bit. There we go. Now we can see Lawrence.
Yeah, well, I was mostly focusing on the camel.
So here's the next question. When it comes to comics taking place during a historical event, how much would you say is okay to imply rather than explicitly say? For example, not talking about a certain religious group being the cause of a historical event in order not to offend anyone in the present day.
I would definitely include the group and offend people, probably.
I mean, if it's fake, you know, I'm not going to mention that the Christians fought crusades because I'm afraid of offending Christians in the audience. Like, I mean,
I got someone complaining about my making stickers making fun of the crusades.
Look, man, like.
Well, if you
crusades, what can you laugh at?
If you decide to admit something like that, that's you like voluntarily choosing to edit a part of history.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when you're doing any sort of historical comic, you kind of have to choose what content you're going to add and what content you're going to leave. More just like, because there's so much history, you have to find a way to find like some kind of linear storyline throughout it. But if it was like, so like I was saying earlier, like the Nazis were like a big part of the Olympics and a lot of Olympic traditions that we have today, but I'm not going to leave that out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Nazis are kind of in general sort of like a worldwide acceptable bad guy. But I feel like personally for me, I would definitely include it and end up pissing people off, but I do that a lot anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, like for my own work, like I primarily focus on biographies, so I can leave some stuff out if it doesn't directly pertain. However, if I were to, which is a highly probable thing, is that if I were to sit down and do an actual graphic history of the Arab Revolt, I can't ignore that Zionism and the Balfour Agreement really ended up shaping our modern world, and to do that would be a disservice to history.
Totally.
And it is a difficult and heavy topic, and it's one of those things that you have to approach with grace and approach with your citations, and make it very clear that you are recording this as a historian. You're not damning an entire group of people. You are damning individuals who've made decisions, which have, as a result, messed with history and messed with our modern day. And I think people just need to understand that it sucks, and we need to work through it as individuals. But yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with relevance as well. I mean, if it is relevant to the conversation, then that is important context that should be discussed. But also, if it's not, then that is something that you should, like, I don't know if every single conversation starts off with like, Thomas Jefferson, who is agnostic, like, and it's like, okay, well, unless you're specifically talking about whatever Thomas Jefferson's religious beliefs are, like, that may or may not contribute to the work at hand.
And an aspect of us working in a visual medium is that we have to be aware of the less than savory and downright racist depictions of people, and make sure that our work does not fall into that. And it's something we have to be very cautious about, but cautious to the point of caring and not to the point of excluding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you choose topics in history eras that you haven't worked with before?
It's in history. So like in a different era of history, other than like if I decided I'm going to go and do Mongol stuff or take a break from Olympic things?
I believe that's probably, that seems to be what this individual's asking. So when you're choosing a project, if you're going outside your comfort zone, I think is like, as far as history is concerned, how do you do that?
I feel like it's just like, sorry, Sarah, do you want to go? I went first last time.
Okay, yeah, I'm stealing it. Start micro and then work upward. Don't go, I'm gonna study what it was like to be a Mongol in the year 300. I really just want to know what that's like, because you will get very easily overwhelmed and confused, and then you'll start realizing that your question made no sense at the beginning. You want to find something very extremely specific and then work from there. So if you're interested in, like, if you say, okay, I want to write about something I've never written about. I want to write about the Aztec Empire. So don't just go, I want to write about the Aztec Empire because this is a huge undertaking. Go, okay, I want to find a specific profession. I want to be a weaver in the Aztec Empire. So now you have a focus. Now you have something that's a little bit, you can look up like textiles. It's still overwhelming and you will still find yourself down 38 rabbit holes, but at least you have something that like cohesively can come back to. I think as storytellers also having a story in mind is a great way to focus on it. So you're not just going in there being like, I wonder what it was like to be a courier in World War I. You can say, okay, well, this guy has a letter from the general, and if he doesn't make it to the front lines, then his brother is going to go over, it's 1917, and his brother's going to go over the trench, and he's going to die, and it's going to be really sad. So now you already, like, you have the story, and the things that you need to research are along the lines of that story. It is very, very tempting to go off and do everything. I know that I have definitely procrastinated on pages, and I'm sure you guys have too, by just like, what was a flashlight looking like for a German soldier in 1940? It is imperative that I look that up before I do anything else. And at some point, you know, you gotta be like, okay, I have researched all of the flashlights in 1940. I just gotta pick one and go with it. You really only have to research the things that have to do with your story. You don't need to know what people are doing on the opposite side of the world at the same time your story is happening. Just focus.
Yep. And one thing, like where I do biography, I like to look for a story. So I have a project that I can't talk about, about a completely different subject matter from what it is that I focus on. And I sat down and was reading about this individual and found something that really interested me about their life, and was like, okay, this is my story. This is what I'm going to research when I do this project.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of going outside of my regular subject matter, I just try and be inspired by like specific people or specific events. Because then you've got like a little bit more, like Sarah was talking about, you have a little bit more of like a narrow focus. Like I did a pirate comic once, and instead of doing a comic about all pirates that have ever existed, I focused on Grace O'Malley, who was awesome. Yeah, I like that everybody was like, yeah. So yeah, if you're looking outside of like your regular interests in looking into starting something with history, I recommend like being inspired by like one specific person or one specific event, as opposed to being like, I really want to make a comic about the Roaring 20s, because then you'll just be spending your entire, like, you're just going to be like, well, what don't I need to know? I need to know what a flashlight looked like in 1920.
I need to know what drain pipes looked like and whether or not a 9-year-old with a hammer and a nail could break one. This is a story. This is the thing I have gone down. I continue to go down it.
So we have a couple more questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them all, but I'm going to sort of go out of order and try and get in what we can. Have you formed any relationships with historians or archivists?
Yes. I have an a librarian in Oxford, who was in Oxford. He's no longer there, but we talk regularly, and he sends me stuff, which is really nice. And then there are other historians and archivists that I speak with semi-regularly and have helped with my research.
Librarians are your friends. Love librarians.
Yeah.
Don't hug them right now, but you know.
I don't have any specific relationships with archivists and historians, but it's because I'm covering like a span of like 150 years. I feel like if I was getting a little bit more specific with one person's life, I probably would. I have great relationships. I got a lot of librarian friends, but they're just not helping me right now.
Well, what are they there for?
We just like hang out in Animal Crossing. That's what you do with your librarian friends.
Yeah.
And let's see. I think, where'd it go? Wait a second, I just have to move mine up. We're still getting a few questions in, but I don't think we can get to all of them. But how do you fund your research trips?
Well,
Myself.
Units, so we're very wealthy.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the last big research trip I went on, I also happened to be on a Fulbright that I just was like, now it's about research for my comic that yeah, so you get someone else to pay you to do something else, and then while you're there you just research it.
I have a lot of family in the UK, so I'll end up, when I do my trips to the UK, I try to build in either like a weekend down in Oxford, or when we're in London, running to one of the various museums.
I save up all year. I have 2 years to save up for the Olympics, and I save up, and it is like my one big trip, and that's all I got.
Do you guys have about like 5-10 more minutes so we can get to some more of these questions, or are you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The sun's starting to rise here, so I'm getting more and more awake.
I did want to say really quick, there are lots of grants and fellowships and scholarships for research opportunities that I highly recommend people who are interested in writing about specific areas look into. I have been, well, until about 6 months ago, I was looking into research trips into Mongolia, because it turns out that there are lots of like, go be on the steppe with tiny ponies and large eagles and draw them, which is my idea of a good time.
Yeah.
And then COVID crushed all of our hopes and dreams. So,
Yeah.
So many hopes and dreams.
so many.
I have to say, that sounds like an amazing trip.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, historic.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a history nerd, so like that sounds like an amazing trip.
Even without the history, like I want to go hang out on the Mongolian steppe with like hairy ponies and eagles. Like,
Yeah.
It sounds great.
the history would be like a bonus.
Yeah, I specifically want to say hi to Genghis Khan. He's done a lot for me personally.
This question is for Sierra. Did you run into any problems with converting your webcomic to print?
Oh, that's a personal question. I think I know who asked that. I don't know who asked it, but it was somebody I was talking to. Yes. If you're making a comic, you should look up what the standard size is for a comic page. And you shouldn't do what I did, which was 5 years ago, choose a random 6.8 by 8.8 size for no apparent reason, and then just do that for 5 years before going to print, and then deciding that you're going to make your comic 6.8 by 9 inches, and then learning that you have to add a 0.25 bleed. So basically
what Sierra is saying is, if you make a custom page size for your comic, you have to pay extra when you're printing that comic, because the printer doesn't already have that size.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even the real problem. The real problem is that you should make sure that your art extends to the edge of the page, and that your panels aren't too close to the edge of the page, because then they will be cut off. So then you have to go and resize all of your pages and extend the art over to the bleed and redo the art. And so it's like 45 additional hours of your life that you will lose watching the entirety of the Umbrella Academy. Which
twice.
Yeah.
And also making sure that it is very expensive to print in color. So,
yeah, don't do
there's
color.
a reason why all of my work is in black and white.
Way cheaper.
Yeah, I'm an idiot, but to be fair, webcomics, you don't have to do that. Just never go to print.
So guys, we're at time, but the last question is very, very important. Where can we buy your comic creations?
Online. I know Ned and I are up on the LadiesCon vendor page.
Yes, you are.
I don't think I am, but I'm Meggie the Ram on pretty much anything. So you can just check me out there. And also, if you have any further questions for us, we're all on Twitter.
Sure.
And by we're all, I mean they're on Twitter, the two of them, and I occasionally pop in there and forget how to use it because I'm old.
I'm putting all of our handles in the chat.
I am the Ned Barnett on absolutely everything, and I run a store envy page. If you go to buy Dreamers of the Day and it says that there are no copies, that's because I ran out at my store manager ran out, but it means I just need to go to the post office and send a whole box because I have tons in my basement.